Welcome to the ERP Seal podcast. My name is Tim Rodman. We are live today on Friday, August 21st, 2026, and this is episode number 184. You can see up on the screen there, episode related links will be found at erpseal.com/episode 184. Today we've got Andrew Nunez, at least that's what it says on his LinkedIn profile. I call him Andy Nunez. You'll see that up on the screen. And we've talked about executive thinking applied to AI. Andy, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. I love your walk-on music too, Tim. Man, it got me going. I love it.
Awesome.
Congratulations on this many episodes. That's fantastic, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think if you set the quality bar low enough, then you can keep it going. That's been my philosophy, at least.
We're definitely going to lower it more today.
I love it. And as you know, I had to shave about Tim, 5 minutes before. Sorry, what?
I said, let's hit that rock bottom. Yeah, you're shaving before. I'm going through, trying to find my microphone. My dog's behind me. I don't know what she's doing.
I love it. I love it. I love keeping it real. You know, there's so much smoke and mirrors, as I like to say, in this space, a lot of fluffy marketing stuff. And that's kind of the idea here, is to cut through that and have as real conversations as we're able to. So yeah, that kind of goes together with it. Well, yeah, I had reached out to you back at the Technology Leader Collective. I forget exactly what it was called, but gathering of Acumatica people, kind of like a large user group in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a downtown, but yeah. It's a
great spot too. Really nice. Beautiful. I had a great time. Lovely area. It's great. You don't even have to be Amish.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was expecting a downtown to be like a stoplight, you know, but no, it's downtown.
Very nice.
And, anyways, I didn't know what you were up to since Endpoint Automation, and you were sharing some of that stuff on stage with the AI stuff, and that'd be cool to kind of catch up there. But before we get into the AI stuff, maybe you can walk us through your brief origin story. Tell us about where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you got into the world of mid-market ERP.
So I grew up in what was then a sleepy little town north of Dallas called Plano, Texas. Now it's like the headquarter capital of the world. At that time, it was, I think, like 79,000 people. And it became just a suburb of Dallas and complete house farm. My mom still lives there, and it was a good place to be from. I went to University of Texas at Austin, which is also a great place to go to school and be from, and to go to. And studied art history and archaeology. I double majored in art history, archaeology. Some people don't know this. I was actually a Mayanist. I was on a couple sites down in Central America, which naturally led me to being a SaaS software CEO. All the skill sets that are defined. What I realized halfway through it is that, I wanted to actually make money and have a living that was, more than just digging in dirt and living in tents. And so I had some friends who that I knew in college. A gentleman named Eric Frank, who you might know well, and his partners, who actually, he's a good friend, and he just started the company. And I was he was the accountant, and Russ was the developer, and a guy named Joe Barber was kind of the business guy. And they needed someone with a silver tongue. And even though they knew I was art history, archaeology, they're like, "Come on, let's do this thing. We're going to start this Solomon practice," right? And I thought, well, that sounds a little cultish, so I'm not doing that, They called me back a year later, and they're like, "Yeah, we're now making some money. We got some customers." And I said, "Nope, I'm working for an educational foundation. Not going to do that." Called me one last time a year later, and they said, "Hey, it's really starting to work out. We're looking to expand." I was living in New York at the time, and they said, "Hey, I'd met this wonderful woman who would soon be my wife, who was no way in hell going to live in Texas. She lived in Toronto." And so Eric said, "Well, hey, we'll split the difference. We'll start an office in New York." And sure enough, I said yes. I married my wife, did the bait and switch, and took her down to Houston for like 3 years, right? Which she has not forgiven me, but she loved Houston. Houston's a great town. I am not going to hate on Houston. It's an awesome town, and she will admit that too eventually. But yeah, did that for 3 years, and then started the New York and New Jersey offices of NexTec. We would then become NexTec because we did a merger after the failed Texas RD merger, original Texas RD merger that would then become E Partners, for those of you that go way back. And stayed at NexTec for many years, built that practice up to a pretty sizable business. And then met Jeff Roth from SWK, because he was in New Jersey, I was in New York. So, and at that time, I didn't know that was verboten, that New Jersey and New Yorkers don't actually go out for lunch. You either have to live in New Jersey or
that's
commute.
a thing, huh? I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a thing. Interesting.
It's kind of a thing. Your Giants or your Jets, man. It's a thing. So I met and I met Jeff at a couple things, and he was really great to solicit me to come on at SWK, and so I left the partnership at NexTec, came on with SWK, and was there for as people know, for about 10 years, working with Jeff, and then with Mark Meller, who I have great affection for, the CEO of SWK. We took the company public. We started and built the X3 practice, built it up to a multi-million-dollar practice. Took on Acumatica, took on NetSuite briefly, and built that team up to over 200 people. It was a great run. Loved that group. Got tapped on the shoulder from Sean and Tess, who were looking to exit Scanco, and they needed someone that knew the business, continuity of management, to be their CEO. Mark was really gracious to say, "Hey, go get them," and so I did, and was there for almost 5 years. We sold to private equity. We had a 5-year plan. We sold it in 3. We were well ahead of plan. Got a great exit for Sean and Tess. I stayed on for a couple years to do a couple of acquisitions and to allow for the private equity to really get their seat in the business. And then told my wife, I guess it was January of 2005. And remember, she's already weary because I've already bait and switched her. But this is after 20 something years of marriage. Told her that I'd take the time off for the entire year of 2025, and she knew better because that lasted like 2 hours, and kind of got back into the saddle doing some consulting work. I had some people tap on me, some people said, "Hey, look, we'd love you to do what you did at SWK or at Scanco or at NexTec, and help us build our business, transition our business, or in some cases exit our business." And in the meantime, I was having lunch with all these people that I knew over the years. And one of them, a guy named Rob Kofsky, who actually I hired to be remember at NexTec back in the day, you were installing literal servers, right? And coaxial cable. So this was my IT guy to implement products like Solomon and Great Plains, et cetera, and Sage 500. He ended up being fast-tracked by Deutsche Bank later on. He left NexTec and went to Luxembourg. He was doing AI like 15 years ago. Then got solicited by a startup that was doing amazing things and still doing amazing things here in New York. So we started talking about it, and I was like, I didn't hate the private equity people. They weren't operators, right? They were financial engineers, and they had their methodology, but it oftentimes didn't apply, especially to the SMB, where you truly needed to understand the business, right? And evolve the business based on your knowledge. And I just thought there was a better way to do the whole diligence phase, because they would buy companies. Essentially, they'd get all these kids from, like Cornell or whatever, and, bring them in, then tell the company they're trying to buy, give us all this data. We'll put it into a data room. It's dead on arrival. It's backward looking. And then essentially the partner in charge will go, that's how much you're worth. It's still a bit of a guess. And so we thought there'd be a better way to do this. And we thought there was a good confluence of the technology and also the fact that people were more willing to communicate like this digitally after COVID. We were forced to, right? Because of our remote connectivity issues, et cetera. And so things like Teams and things like that became much more pervasive. And even today, even when people are back in the office, they still use Teams to do meetings. And so I thought there's a better way to put all this together. And so that led me to our business development engine, BDE, being the product that we developed. I got it, it's great. What I enjoy most about this, Tim, is it's like an all-star for my career. Everybody in each step of my career kind of came out of the woodworks, and I'm working with those folks now, and it's just a lot of fun. But that's enough about me.
No, I love it. Actually, I'm glad that you didn't give the brief origin story. I wasn't expecting you to be able to give a brief origin story.
I am part of the anti-brevity league. You know that, right? You knew you're in trouble. You're going to get 10 minutes.
No, I do it. Right. But especially someone like you, I wanted the full history. No, so I'm glad you gave that. That's awesome. Yeah, and the reason why, well, I like having, I would love to have you on no matter what, but the specific thing, and you would see it in the episode thumbnail in the beginning there with a 30-second countdown is, I'd love to dig into more of the BDE thing that you're working on, but just stepping back for a minute to AI in general, the executive thinking level from your perspective, just because you've been in this space for so long and you have that kind of executive level thinking, like just your perspective on AI in general. First, I guess my question is it a real transformative technology shift? Or when it comes to ERP systems, is it like more like the move from desktop to web browser in that, yeah, it's a technology shift, but it's not so massive as it's being, overblown to be. Just what's your take on AI in general from that 50,000 foot level?
Really quickly, the history lesson of the evolution of how we manage data, right? And is that we went from, relational database to start to, disparate systems that did, operational things to ERP that brought it all together. And then we have all this information and we fire hydrant it back to the people who can't interpret it because it's too much information. And from an executive standpoint, it was always about getting into the conference room. And what I mean by that is you always got into the conference room with all your best people, with all the spreadsheets, with all the knowledge, with the PowerPoints and all that stuff. You have a discussion. And then it all starts with your data. It all starts with every bit of the data. And then you create a narrative about that data because you interpret it. You believe this, you don't believe this. You say this is a trend, you don't say this is a trend. This is a good customer, this is a bad customer, all of that. It doesn't matter what the agenda is. The human then decides on what the narrative is. And to answer your question simply, I'm not gonna undersell it. AI is as revolutionary as the database itself. And here's why. Because we get to now define the data narrative comprehensively. Because the problem with doing it in the conference room is that half of that information is lost as soon as you walk out. And the rest is maintained right up here. And so it created a supreme dependency on the individuals who are in that room. And then we got a little better at documenting it. We would do things to take notes and do all these kind of things and then institutionalize the decisions made and all that kind of stuff. But there's still so much lost in translation. And the fact is now we can pull all of that content in, all of that intentional content. You can pull it in through Teams. You could actually have that discussion, that entire discussion be transcript, and the interpretation of that discussion then be liturgized in a data set. And I think the problem with AI that we have today is the same problem we had with the DOS prompt back in the database days, because that's what it is. Right now, it's at the DOS prompt phase, right? It's input this, output that, right? If then. It's just a lot more complex than it was back then. The big problem with that was always what's behind the then, right? And it's the same that problem we have today. And this is why AI will succeed and fail in many ways over the next couple of years. We assume that the reason why it gives us a result is pristine, or we don't, and we question it. That's why we need to get into the conference room, because we need to exercise that demon, right? We need to talk about it. Okay, it told me it was this. The P&L says this. Why? Right? And so I think the big problem we have with AI today, and what will limit it is not so much the answers it gives, because they're going to be good, bad, or otherwise, just like anyone else responding. I don't give great answers. I tell a lot of things that are big misses, and the fact is that I do it with the best I can with the knowledge I have and the interpretation that I bring as an executive. That's always the only thing I could hope for. AI does the same thing. We can't expect any more from it. The important part is understanding why. Why did it give me this result? And that's about breadcrumbing the data, understanding the narrative that it is creating, and understanding how it came to the source of that answer. And I think once we figure that part out, then this is, it changes everything.
Tell me more what you mean by the conference room, because I kind of heard two different things there. One is that it was all about getting into the conference room and being able to have those discussions. And I totally resonate with that. I used to say, well, no, I think I still say it, but AI is changing it. I say that you go into a meeting room or a virtual meeting room in any company, and I think more than 50% of the time, what they're using to make decisions is an Excel file. But it's the same idea, right? Like you're surfacing the stuff to bring the data to the meeting, to have a narrative about it, make decisions. But then I sort of heard you say with AI that maybe it moves away from the conference room, but then you kind of brought it back to the conference room. Yeah, talk to me what you meant about that, like the conference room specifically.
Really, I should say to that more clearly. What I mean here is that Excel spreadsheet unto itself does nothing for you, right? And even when you have the person who created it, they have some knowledge on it, but the interpretation of the information is only limited to them. When there's another person involved, when there's a third person, when there's a fourth person, when you get into the conference room, that's when you create the data narrative, right? That's when that spreadsheet turns into actionable items. That's when you start making decisions. And the content that conference room gives us, the context that conference room discussion gives us is how we always made our decisions. Now, it isn't always a conference room. I use that as an analogy. It could just be, hey, let's meet in the hallway.
In person, but it's the coming together of people to have a discussion about it. Yeah. So
exactly.
So you're saying that that's still important in the age of AI, but then how is AI changing that? Or is it changing the importance of it? Is it changing the output of it? Where you were saying most of it walks out the door, like now you can capture the transcript.
That's right.
Yeah. What were you saying there?
Tim, this is the fundamental difference. This is because every ounce of that interpretation can now be digitized. Every bit of that discussion can now be put in, as I said, into a narrative, into a liturgy that is codified for all time, right? We can actually put that into our database. So our spreadsheet no longer just is a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet with context, right? And our database, our ERP systems that give us output, you now can put all of that information together. I can take, here's my input from my ERP, here's my input from Gong, here's data info source, frankly, I could go out and tap into Reddit and the commentary that customers have on our products. I could do that now. Now, bringing that all together creates a narrative. The thing about it is you have to be able to source the data. I trust the sales numbers in Acumatica or my ERP far more than someone's opinion out on the Reddit website, right? So as long as I can create context for that, then I can actually define that narrative, and I can use what I did in that conference room effectively with the data that I bring in, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, in the sense that we've always been able to source the data or some version of the data when it comes to the numbers, but the narrative itself that gets discussed in the conference room, that's never been able to be provided as context to some computer layer. So now, if I think of it in two different worlds, we've always had like the very boxy rectangular spreadsheet shaped data, but the loosey-goosey written up transcript has never been able to get combined by the computer into some level of analysis. That's the fundamental difference I think that you're talking about. Is that what you're saying?
And it's right. And as a CEO or an executive or a business owner, I am always going to have to make that final decision. But I rely on that conference room discussion to help me make it. And now I can institutionalize every bit of that. I can reference all of it, and I can then have a agentive agent, give me recommendations based on that, right? It could say, remember that we talked about this, and you were thinking about this customer in this way, or this group of customers in this way. That doesn't change the fact that I still have to make the decision. That doesn't change the fact that there will be opinions that form my decision, right? But what I can do now is I can breadcrumb back more effectively how I came to that.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah. I like that.
And think about that, Tim. I mean, and this is not just about technology. This is frankly about how we fundamentally changed doing business after COVID, right? How we now are much more comfortable with digitizing that commentary. It's all digitized now. So it's all available.
Yeah.
And if it's all available, it can all be interpreted.
Interesting. Yeah, because you're not having as many conference room meetings that don't have a recorder on. Like people have just know
That's
when
absolutely
you're having
true.
a discussion, even if it's in a small group, it's essentially company knowledge.
That's right. And think about the power of social media for marketing now. It's completely changed. It's not about sending, leaflets or envelopes out in the mail, or even sending emails and hoping that someone responds to it. It's now an open dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Marketing is an open dialogue. It's a bi-directional dialogue in 166 characters.
I picked that up at when I worked at Acumatica. I mean, this is about 10 years ago. John Roscoe was the CEO at the time, and he very much had the stuff he would do in our quarterly reviews was like almost uncomfortable level of transparency. The numbers he would show us, and it sort of sounds like you have a similar philosophy in that you're not talking about taking all your company data and making it public, but you're almost sort of talking about having a public conversation within the walls of the company. Is that kind of your philosophy?
100%. And again, think of it in terms of database. Think of it in terms of the evolution of the spreadsheet. Everybody has access to a spreadsheet. Everybody has access to a frontier model, right? Everybody can tap into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. You can use it however you want. But where it becomes effective for people is when they put it within the virtual walls of their company. Where did that spreadsheet become effective? When it turns into a relational database in an ERP system, right? But that unto itself is confined. That data is confined. And because it's confined, it gives us a confined output. If I can add context to that, if I can add, incremental information that adds value, then it becomes much more effective. But I can still keep that within the defined walls of my virtual company, right?
Yeah.
So I think the evolution here, Tim, is going to be that you're going to find that people are going to have LLMs that are much more, focused in on their individual data set, but they'll still use the outside world to give context to it.
Right. No, I love that. You just reminded me of putting it up on the screen there. You can check it out at erpseal.com/fair game. This is a book that just came out last week, written by a friend of mine, Rob Colley, who I know from the Power BI space. It's only the second book he's written, but his first book on Power BI grossed like over $1 million in sales. And anyways, one of the chapters in there, he says that LLMs have a PhD in everything but your business. And their knowledge is way up here in terms of everything, but then it drops off like a cliff when it comes to your business. And so we're all trying to figure out right now how to take that big brain and give it the context in the business. And I think that's a lot what you're talking about, whether it's your boxy ERP data or whether it's your free-flowing meeting notes. The LLM needs more and more of that context to be effective working in a business. Would you agree?
That's right. Yeah, 100%, Tim. And because we are all not confined to one building doing this work in that business these days, it's even more critical, right? It's even more critical to be able to tap into it. And we simply can. We're just not doing it yet.
So the technology or the cultural shift that pushed us into isolated remote work may have been the trigger to actually give us visibility into the business that we never had before.
Yeah, honestly, it's absolutely true. It seems ironic, but it's the truth. And the technology was always there. Teams existed in some form or fashion before COVID, but it just wasn't used. That's why it was so easily deployed. In that time place, because they already had this worked out. They just didn't have it on scale.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that connection. I love that. So then talk to me about, let's still just call it the conference room, whether it's a virtual conference room or a physical conference room, that I don't think you're saying that goes away. What I think you're saying is that now, as you have those conversations together, you're able to more easily build on those conversations, rather than so many times you have a meeting and you feel like you're just rehashing what you talked about last week.
Right.
Maybe you're able to build on things better instead of just restarting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. How many times have we said the most effective conversations were at the water cooler, or when we were walking by each other in the hallway? Well, now that happens in a quick Teams chat, or even in an email, or a text potentially, right? Context happens everywhere, and some of the best context happens informally. And if we can capture that, then we can add better interpretation to the way our business is moving. To be bluntly honest, Tim, it becomes a little Big Brother. But the fact of the matter is, But the fact of the matter is, we've been doing this for years and years and years. We just haven't really, had the ability to do it as comprehensively as we do now. There's going to be a lot of stuff that evolves on this. Privacy issues, obviously data security issues. I'm already dealing with a lot of that in some of our early customers with BDE. And we're going to work through that, just like we did when the first time that calls got recorded on a call center, right? Same deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that sense, it's nothing new. Yeah.
Yeah, it isn't.
I'm going to throw a Jeff Bezos quote at you. I've actually got this. 1 second. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Put the banner up. Give me a moment. So I've got this on a blog post. You can see it up on the screen, ogforum.com/data informed, not data driven. And I wrote up this blog post about being a fan of being data informed, personally not being a fan of being data driven. When you're data driven, the machines are running the show and the humans are subordinate. But I got a quote here from Jeff Bezos that I thought was really interesting, because it was in the context of, if you remember that Amazon HQ2 thing that they went through, they made all this noise like for over a year about where we're going to put our second headquarters. And they had all these cities fawning over them with tax incentives and stuff like that. They were collecting all this data. And even Amazon, a very data-driven company, and you got Jeff Bezos, who walks around with this robot dog. I remember one image. This guy likes technology. And so I love this quote, knowing that background, and I want to hear a response to it. So he says, ultimately, and this is specifically about the HQ2 decision, ultimately, the decision will be made with intuition after gathering and studying a lot of data. For a decision like that, as far as I know, the best way to make it is you collect as much data as you can, you immerse yourself in that data, but then you make the decision with your heart. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, look, our tagline for BDE is turning data into direction, right? And I sincerely believe that, because the delta between the data itself, which is completely objective, and direction, which is completely objective, right? I'm sorry, subjective, from objective to subjective, is always going to be human intent, right? And the humans will always make their decision based on instinct. And that instinct can be overridden by knowledge, by experience, by information that they have at the time. It can be impacted by that, but ultimately, it'll always be subjective decision, no matter how much you try to objectify it. And so the difference between data and direction is what Bezos is talking about there, right? You make an informed decision based on the best set of knowledge you have. And if I can bring more knowledge to the table to that executive, right? If I can give them more insight, they still might not believe it, but at least I can give them the liturgy, again, that data narrative, versus just the P&L, right? It's that much closer to the reality of what's going on, right? The heartbeat of what's really going on in a company. The interpretation, my one of my analogies is I used to do sales pipeline meetings all the time. We had this great CRM system that everybody fed, spent a lot of time. It would kick out a cool pipeline, look really cool. The visuals were great. And I would look at it and I would say, okay, this salesperson says this deal's going to close next month. But he's been saying that for the last 6 months, right? So what do? We have a sales pipeline meeting where we play Stump the Chump on all the salesmen, and say, okay, you said this is closing this month. What's different, right? Well, he's going to give, or she's going to give an answer. And I'm going to decide as a sales manager whether I believe it, right? But now, and then we go away. And we walk out of the conference room, we go away, and we make decisions on the business. Now, I can actually document that answer and the interpretation of the answer and all the stuff that everyone was saying. Hey, maybe you should try this to close the business. Maybe, if the CEO's gone cold on you, maybe you should do this or that. All of that stuff is now context, right? And it's context for all time. Every single meeting I've ever had, every pipeline meeting will now be completely put into play and part of that data narrative. On top of that, Tim, I can also look back in time and my AI can say, well, they bought on this month when this happened in the market. And guess what? 6 years later, they bought again. Ooh, that's a trend. That's something on the outside that my team might have not seen, right? That caused the customer to have that impact. That's where you said, the AI is a professor of everything except your business. It knows everything else that's going on in the outside world. Put those all together and think about the power of that. And all it's going to do is going to come back and say to me, the sales manager, hey, this is what they said. This is what you heard before. And you might still have that meeting. And guess what? Here's some other elements that might be impacting this, right? So I have just that bit of more information to make my decision.
Love that. And
data and direction, man.
What's that?
Data and direction, man. That's what it is. Bezos is 100% right.
I like that.
I'll go buy some Amazon.
I love that. So I think that sort of then goes to, I wanted to ask you about this, but that then explains a little more to me why you use that word comprehensively. But I do want to dig into that a little more. I think comprehensive, you're now talking about, we have the outside knowledge, we have the inside knowledge, we have the raw data knowledge, we have the opinions that have been discussed in meetings knowledge. But one thing that I personally am still trying to wrap my head around is how today, or at least in the next 6 months, you actually achieve that comprehensively part. Maybe this is where you can start digging into how you're doing it at BDE. And the reason why I'm struggling with it is currently LLMs have about 1 million token context window. A token is about 3/4 of a word. So whatever that math is, I can never remember. Do you multiply by 4/3 or 3/4? I don't remember. But your words are sort of in the neighborhood of 1 million words. Even if they double it to 2 million, there's no way you're bringing in all of that inside and outside context for the LLM to work on. So you have to break it down into smaller problems right now.
Yep.
And to me, it then becomes more of a traditional search type of a challenge. But and that's where I'm still struggling. Where's the real breakthrough that LLMs are able to deliver right now, specifically when you talk about that comprehensive view? Maybe you could speak to that.
Well, this is what I was talking about before. We're in the DOS prompt stage, right? And you hit the nail on the head there. The evolution, even the last, 8 months since we started BDE, developing BDE, it's been tremendous. We now have a RAG that brings together all the frontier models when they are most appropriate, because they jump ahead of each other every day. And we focus on building that liturgy, that LLM, very specifically for the context of the initiative we have. Like our initial deployment was for private equity. It's essentially a data room. So it was confined information, but dynamic information that they could then create a baseline and then measure the company after they bought it, because why toss all that info? Now we're working on projects with resellers where we're doing customer segmentation of their legacy customer base, right? How do you repenetrate into this customer base effectively based on all the variables that happen?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That is about ingestion, Tim. That's not, and this is where, again, we miss the mark. We're thinking of it as DOS prompt, input in, input out. And like you said, it's very linear, right? And it then therefore also confined. But when you create an ingestion engine that is constantly pulling from multiple sources and being efficient on how it partitions the information, I only want you to answer this because this is why I've asked for it. Again, that is critical because once you do that, then it's even more critical to have that breadcrumb, because when the human says, why did you answer it this way? I need to be able to go back to the highlighted line in the P&L that helped me bring that. It's not just going to be that. It's going to be the highlighted line in the P&L. It's going to be how we set our strategic goals in the highlighted document of our strategic goals. It's going to be the context that Andy gave the system 3 weeks ago and was then put into the system when Andy said, no, this is wrong. This P&L doesn't make sense. The 4000 series isn't revenue, whatever, that all of that context is very pointed, Tim. And yet it's also bringing in a lot more than the DOS prompt, right? So the ingestion engine and the evolution of that is going to be critical. And again, what I feel like this is, once again, if I were to use history, it's the difference between a spreadsheet and ERP system, right? It's the difference between a flat file document or a multi-tab document and a relational database, right? They actually build on each other. One builds on the other. However, the other one gives context, but within a framework. And so that, I think, is the evolution that's going to happen. And it's happening quick, Tim. I mean, I'm not kidding. In the last 8 months, the amount of information that we can parse out and institutionalize has just grown exponentially, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. I think one of the things that happened not too long ago is the release that Claude put out, that Agentic put out, that allows developers now to kind of take that multi-dimensional approach. I don't know the tech as well as I should on this, but the fact is my team got really excited about that, because now they can now pull in various points what the right model to give them the horsepower to be able to create this liturgy and to keep it in that context, so it doesn't go just blow up everywhere and give you false narratives.
Yeah, and that's the part I've been focused on, and I still don't understand the tech well enough, but I've been digging into it, where it kind of comes down to how you structure the data. And so
it does.
We've got this huge LLM brain, but it's about, because we can't, and I think this is where a lot of people assume that, well, that just means we take all of our meeting minutes and we take all of our data and we just throw it over to the LLM, like you were saying, the answer response kind of thing. But you can't do it because it can't hold it all in its memory because of that million or so context window. And so that's when it comes down to, I almost think of it as like you're defining this spider web, and you were talking about the path, so you know where it got the answer from. And you have to structure this kind of spider web of information so that the LLM can just sort of trace its way through and find the answer that's looking for. And that's where it needs to know, when should I go down this path, or should I go down this path to find what I'm looking for? And then when it finds it, that path, so you can go back and fact check it when it comes back to you, that highlighted thing on the P&L or whatever it is that you're talking about. But that's not really an AI thing. That's more of a data structure thing. And people are just kind of learning how the AI what structure the AI prefers to work with. They learned early on that it likes markdown files because they're super simple. And this kind of goes back to more like traditional database thinking, where how do you join things together? And I think that's the part that everyone's working through right now. But I don't think it changes the LLM brain at all. It's just how to apply the LLM brain in the walls of a company. Is that what you're finding?
Absolutely. Like anything else, if I can summarize something into a digestible response that makes me more efficient the next time I have to refer back to this, I should. And that's what we're talking about here. This is no different than a company creating a strategy document. We talk about a company talks about their direction and where they want to go. Well, we should put this on paper, right? And so what do? They confine it to that document, right? And they try to summarize as best they can what everybody's been talking about. And if they do a good job, it's something they can use. It's not dead on arrival. It's a dynamic document, right, that they can use later. Same thing with LLM. I'm trying to create those little strategy documents within the database. And you said it very well. If you can do that, well, then I can be a lot more efficient the next time I come back. Well, what was my strategy? What was I thinking? Okay, it's these 3 lines, not this long diatribe that Andy made to get there.
I like the way you just phrased that. Creating, I'm writing it down. I've taken notes, by the way, on this side of the screen. I'm not multitasking.
Okay.
It's about creating strategy documents in your database. And that, if I then take it to like the lowly meeting or conference room gathering that you just had, let's say there's 20,000 words in that transcript. You can't have the LLM look at all of the meeting transcripts averaging 20,000 words because it blows the context window. But I think what you're saying there is for each meeting transcript, we need that little summary that's bubbling up the key things about that meeting. And the AI is going to ingest that across all of the meeting transcripts and then decide which one it's going to dive into for more detail. Is that a good way of describing it?
Yeah. What's interesting, Tim, is that, we're now integrating into all these tools, and everybody's putting AI in their tools. All the ERPs are throwing AI into their tools. Gong has a cool thing. Data Info Source or Zoom Info Source has their own AI. Everybody's doing it. And they're doing it within the context of their own little island, right? And you would think that would be competitive to BDE, which kind of, straddles the fence of all of it, right? We look to get all of this. But no, I actually look to that summary from Gong, right? To what Gong has taken all of those call transcripts and turn them into a liturgy itself. I can look to that because it's a lot more efficient for me, right? And now I can pull all of it in, I can bring it in, and my strength is that I straddle the fence. I go across all things. Gong will never do that.
Interesting. So you're kind of, I'm going to use the mashup phrase again, data phrase. You're mashing up the data from, yeah, interesting. So you're going to leverage the work that Gong's already doing to summarize it, just take that as an input, but then Gong doesn't know about the ERP data, so you're going to bring that in as well. What about on the ERP
human
side?
Context.
Say again?
Or the human context. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
Yeah.
Like the human context is critical. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts, and if you don't want to ruffle feathers, you don't have to say this, but I don't think you have a big concern about that. I was just at Acumatica Ascent in Denver last week, and really good, really enjoyable stuff. Love especially all the modern UI stuff. Also sat in a full day session on all the AI stuff they're releasing in Acumatica 2026 R2. Thought it was super interesting, but I'm still, and I think there's definitely a lot of use cases for it. I'm still not completely sold, though, that for me, the most interesting thing is AI within the ERP because of what you were just talking about, that each system kind of knows what it knows, but it doesn't have the comprehensive view. What's your take on AI, whether it's just the meeting note AI, whether it's the ERP AI, like the line of business application AI versus the more comprehensive view that you're talking about? What's your take on that?
If you think of AI as a replacement for some of the human interpretation and intelligence, you're going to get advice from, people that have had experience and are managers and have worked their way up through a company and deserve the soundboard that you give them. And you're going to put more credence on that than the person who just started as the AP clerk yesterday, right? Way I look at it, AI can return, you could just go to ChatGPT and say, tell me about this company. Well, that's really the AP clerk who just started yesterday. If it has more context, if it has more understanding, if it knows the P&Ls, it just elevated itself up to the person who's worked their way up. And it's more important. So the reason why I say that is to answer your question. When you're limited in the data, you're limited in your response. And so I love that, the ERP solutions and everybody are, putting AI into their tool set, but with the limited data set, it's just advanced BI. And it can do more than that, and it will do more than that. And it can create actionable things, which is way beyond what BI could. But I think that's part of the problem, is that you're limiting a tool that was designed to be unlimited, right? And so they will create things that are great, and I hope they do that. I hope they continue to do that. It'll make their tools better. I mean, I think certain, CTOs have a of certain software public companies have the goal of eliminating the close in the finance
Right.
period, right? With
Right.
AI, and that's actually a noble goal, and I think it certainly will happen. I think there are certain tasks that will be unnecessary when you have that kind of power in your tool set. But once again, does it tell me does it really tell me when this customer is going to buy next? Um, and can it tell me if it doesn't know anything other than what's in the ERP data? I don't think so. And so it's going to need to pull in from other sources. And it's what I think the evolution will be, once again, is taking all those separate, disparate systems, all those separate different spreadsheets, and putting them into that, relational database. Once again, I go back to that terrible analogy, but it's the truth. This is just reforming ERP, and bringing it much more comprehensively, as I said before. This isn't just about pulling in your warehouse, your sales, your support, your accounting. This is about taking it all in. And we will get there, Tim. I think we will get there really fast.
And I think you kind of parsed it out into two very distinct areas. I'm sure it's more than two, but what I heard there was two very distinct areas. One is when you use AI as a worker to automate things. And I think that resonates with most people. Like automation, they can understand because like I know what I do to do this, and now can a machine just do it for me? And when you're talking about the automation side of it, then I'm thinking of it like getting data capture. And so, you mentioned the month end close example. I think that's a great use case for AI in ERP. So when you're talking about automating things to streamline the capture of data, going back to your data versus direction, I think that's a great opportunity for AI within these line of business applications. And even as you said with Gong, a meeting transcript tool, let it do its summary. That it's got the context to do that. So let it do that piece of it. But we're essentially just capturing another piece of data, the summary of that meeting, the strategy document for that meeting. But then there's the other piece of AI, which is more the direction side that you were talking about, which is now give me insights back out of that data. So I now have more data to work with because I've used AI to help automate more stuff. But now I want more of the strategy side of it or the direction side of it. And that's where it feels more like a business intelligence tool than it does an ERP tool, because those tools have always thought in terms of, let me just grab the data wherever it's at. I'm not going to try to force everything into one central system. And that sounds like more what you're working on with BDE, is that bring everything together for that comprehensive insight back out view. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the analogy, right? We had spreadsheets first. We created relational databases to solve for what spreadsheets couldn't solve for, right? But we still use spreadsheets, right? We use them religiously. In fact, to the point where the ERP solutions then had to embed spreadsheets within the ERP solutions, right? It became fully circular. I mean, to me, besides, dark mode, that's probably the best innovation that ERP has done in the last, 5 years, is embedding spreadsheets dynamically. You're
referencing a comment I made before we hit record, which was last week at Ascent. The AI stuff was great. There's so many permutations. My head's still spinning. But actually, what landed the most with me was the dark mode.
Dark mode, man. That's awesome.
I'm like, I think most people are going to be more excited about that than AI.
I mean, I'm fired up about it. I mean, come on, dark mode's awesome. It's great. Thank you for once. Thank you.
I love that. So,
but the whole point is you hit the nail on the head, Tim. We still use AI for prompting. ChatGPT is fun. It tells us things. It gives us insight. But it's really for us, right? It's really for me. Just like that spreadsheet. I create that spreadsheet. I create all kinds of logics and formulas and multi-tab stuff. And then I can express it to someone else, right? I can show them an output. But if I go away, what is that spreadsheet worth to them? They have to reverse engineer it to figure out what I was thinking, right? That's why we created a relational database, because it provides structure around that, right? So you hit the nail on the head. The use of a relational database is definitely that systemic business process. The spreadsheet helps us interpret the numbers, right? They're both useful. They're both important. They both continue to be important. Same thing will happen with AI. Once we get the ingestion component figured out, man, that's going to be it. It's going to have everything it needs. And we will have everything it needs from the output standpoint, and we will revolutionize how we do business.
So tell me more about BDE specifically. And by the way, do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour in the next 5 minutes?
I can go a little farther. Yes, I can.
Or we go over just a little bit.
Let me double check.
BDE specifically.
Sure.
Take a minute to double check.
No, go ahead. You keep on going. No, I'm good. I'm definitely good.
BDE specifically, talk to me about the initial idea, which I think was targeting private equity firms, and then tell me about the VAR piece, which I didn't know about. Yeah, tell me about the actual application use case side of BDE.
So like everything else in AI and new technologies, it just evolved really fast. We started off in December of last year. We started designing it earlier, but we started off coding in December of last year for that private equity. If you think about it, again, how amazing if you could get all this information, all this context about a company before you buy them, right? Versus just here's your P&L, your churn spreadsheet, you can see into my CRM, whatever. And then by the way, then what do? The private equity firm asks questions of the people and gets them into a conference room and says, well, tell me about this. What is this? Give me these answers, right? You can put all that in context, and not only in the moment or the 45 days of diligence, but looking back years and years and years, every bit of information. You could know anything you want to know about that company and the context, the leadership, the clarity of the product lines, the tech debt, all of that stuff can be put in, and a company could prepare for exit by just doing that. So that was the idea, and it still is a very important and powerful one. But private equity is private equity; it goes up and down. And so what we realized early on is that we're bringing all this information in. It's just not about buying and selling companies, right? I mean, think about it. I have all this information. I have all this customer information. Why couldn't we turn that internally on a company that's looking to better monetize their customers, which we all are, right? And so we started this proof of concept with a couple of partners, and it just morphed. It kept on going because, again, the tool itself is pretty strong. We built it on creating that engine, creating that narrative of data, right? Pull it all in, rate the quality of the data. We actually scorecard it, breadcrumb it all so that when you have an answer, you can go back and look at the entire wad of data and find out why. That's the most important thing. Second thing is we created pillars. We created scoring pillars, based on what private equity, the principal 6 pillars, right? Customer health, leadership, technical debt, right? All the things. It was based around SaaS products. All the things that you measure your company on. And then we allowed people to change those measurements. So the private equity could say, I have this thesis that I want to buy a company that's a SaaS-based company, or I want to create a portfolio of SaaS-based companies in warehouse management that are of a certain, ARR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They could keep on just prompting that pillar, and it would create the pillar. These are the items you should be looking for. This is how I would rate it. This is how you want to rate it. Now, let's take that data liturgy from the company and let's apply it to your rating, and let's figure out what the score is, right? What the business owner is going to say is, no, I disagree with your scoring system. And then you actually have a discussion, and that's how you negotiate the sale, right? It's what we do already, just in a lot more clumsy fashion and only in 45 days. Better decisions. But you can do the same thing. Think about it. You could do the same thing managing your customer segmentation. Let's say you base your customers on ABC ratings. You base them on a customer is about a customer that drives this amount of ARR, that is this complex of a solution that talks to our people on every couple of weeks, right? And there's lots of companies that do that. It's a really basic way to channel segment, I call it, their customers, right? But does it really segment their customers? Do you really know why that customer's buying or not? No. You're just taking the matrix that are easiest to consume. So BDE can take that and also say, well, this customer just got bought out by private equity. This customer just on LinkedIn had a new CFO come on board. Well, those are all triggers, right? Those are all things. Those are all signals, as we call them, that might make a customer have more of a propensity to be buying or not buying, right? That's segmentation, Tim. That's real customer segmentation. It's totally dynamic. It changes constantly, and you get output. So that's what our next thesis is. We've already tested it in a couple sites, and it's working brilliantly. I mean, you think about the effectiveness you can have now. You can design playbooks not just for industry segments, but for actual customers themselves, based on who they are.
That's
so
interesting.
that's the next step.
That's fascinating, and it doesn't sound like a pivot. It just sounds like an additional thing that you're doing, right?
We're using the same pillar that we use for customer health in the private equity piece. It's almost the same rubric.
Interesting. So you're focused then on like what you can do with your existing customer base, but then that likely turns into how to grow your customer base with the outside market, where you already kind of talked to it. If you're noticing signals from your existing customers, you could notice signals from the market, someone who's not your customer as well, right? You just sort of keep moving up the funnel into the sales pipeline.
And if you have Zoom info, we'll tap into that, or some other, marketing tool, Clay, or whatever you use to define you, or if you don't have it, that's fine too, right? All those things do is get us there faster, right? Help us again, kind of chew the food first, and allow us to have those summaries that make it more efficient. But we don't need that. It's really interesting.
You may or may not know this, but when you mentioned Zoom info specifically, or any of these like market data type of tools, as I understand it, the legal agreements there is, hey, you're going to use our data just for your company. Have you ever looked into, like, for a platform like yours, if you can just license that on the back end and bring that to the table so someone doesn't even have to license that data? I think it's hard to do, but I don't know if you looked into it.
Answer is yes, because think about it this way, and this was for the private equity. What if I have one company who is using BDE they're an HVAC company, let's say, which is a big, right now, those are being consolidated like mad in the private equity world. Let's say you have one HVAC company, and I have all their information. I see all their trending. I see all of that. That's pretty powerful for the private equity company coming in to buy them, because they see a lot more information they would have. But what if I have 100 companies on that same system? Now I can trend against other companies. I can make that anonymous data, right? There is obviously this is where the challenge of security and privacy is going to come in, and that's also evolving pretty quickly, Tim, because we have to do this, right? We have to make sure this is private. But the fact is, I could say to that private equity firm, okay, you want to buy a portfolio of HVAC companies? I can see 100 of these.
Yeah.
Now they're not all the same. They might all do the same thing fundamentally, but they're all different. Some are small, some are large, some are regional, some are multinational, blah, 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 blah. You tell me what you want, and I can match you up. And I can tell you whether your thesis makes sense. Who's most successful? And you do it, you segmentize it, right? You can't do it individually, but you segmentize to say, well, these guys are actually doing a lot better because of this, this, and this. And it could be because of this outside thing happening, which again, our AI can figure out.
That's interesting. So you're not just talking about how to utilize Zoom info. You're almost talking about becoming a Zoom info, but on a much more detailed level, like potentially in the future.
Yeah, it becomes a marketplace, and I think people are going to do this. This is not revolutionary. Gartner does this, just a lot less clumsy, and we're a lot more clumsy because they don't have this kind of tool, right? They do it with a lot of manpower.
Right.
But it's all the same.
And then when you're going to market right now with this second use case of where you're going into companies directly and not just the PE firms, are you currently, and this is evolving so fast, so who knows if it changes next week, but are you currently thinking you're mostly knocking on the doors of individual companies, or more knocking on the doors of consultancies, like a traditional ERP VAR that you're used to, who then takes it to their clients? How are you approaching it right now?
That's a really good question. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel of certain channels and ecosystems. I think this product can straddle the fence of a lot of different ecosystems, and therefore different models for go-to-market, right? I think my natural inclination is channelization, the ERP adjacent world, right? So that is the easiest route for me personally. But you know, when we I think really start getting traction, it'd be easy to spool up different lines here, right? Because it makes a lot of sense. With private equity,
don't pick a path, do both basically.
Yeah,
or do
yeah,
both of
right.
them.
I mean, you know, it's like anything else. Stay focused, but you know, cast a net, right?
Yeah. I had someone named Jim Rubble on episode 181 a few episodes ago, and he had a similar mindset where they built something on the marketing side to help companies understand how they're doing in terms of both SEO and AEO. And instead of going to companies individually, they eventually sort of discovered that it's more of a marketing agency play for them. That way they're hitting multiple clients on the back end. But you can do both, right? And it's all about
absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
I can see the tool itself also being channelized just like an ERP solution, right? You just become a publisher, let people verticalize it the way they want to. I could definitely see that.
Very cool. Well, I want to respect your time. Thanks for going over. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, this has been fun, Tim. We need to get back together down in either Florida or wherever the last place we were and have some dinner again too. That was a lot of fun.
Sounds great. Sounds great. I'm totally up for it. So you're in New York these days, right? You're in Brooklyn.
I am.
Like
yeah. Hudson Valley. Yep.
Yeah.
Anytime, brother. Anytime.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking time, Andy. Really appreciate it. And catch you soon.
All right. Thanks, Tim.